After 20 years of .NET development, Microsoft just solved the problem that the community was asking for since day one. Watch this. If I have a simple file hello.cs with just one line, console.writeline hello world, and then I go to my command line and I type the command .NET run and the name of that file, it will execute the code. And it's done. No project file, no ceremony, just code that runs. Yeah, I know, it's just an hello world. Who cares, right? But let me tell you that this is bigger than you think. Because here's the thing, we have been building workarounds for this exact problem for 2 decades. The real story isn't that Microsoft finally gave us a script-like execution in .NET 10. That's not the story that I want to tell you about today. If you want to see how to use this feature, how to go deep into that feature, make sure you watch Nick Schaap's video because he has a great video on it. So on this video, I want to tell you why this is more important than you think. The first reactions from the community were kind of like a mixed feeling. Some really liked it, some really hate it. Some say that no one cares about this, no one will be using it. So I have a story to tell you. Let's go back to 2004. .NET had been out for just 2 years when a developer named Oleg, sorry for butchering your name, released something called CS Script. Think about that timing. We were barely out of .NET 1.0 and someone was already saying, you know what, this project ceremony is ridiculous, we need something else. And that's when he created CS Script. CS Script proved that hosted C# execution was possible. It required a separate runtime, but it showed the demand existed. And that demand never went away. If we fast forward to 2012, Microsoft releases Roslyn. And suddenly we have CSX files and the C# interactive REPL. Microsoft accidentally gave us the tools we needed and the community ran with it. For example, Azure Functions embraced the CSX files early on. Check this out. In the documentation of Azure Functions, you can find this line. The CSX format allows you to write less boilerplate and focus on writing just C# function. Instead of wrapping everything in a namespace and class, just define a run method. Include any assembly references and namespaces at the beginning of the file as usual. So if at some point this was a big thing at Azure when they decided to come up with Azure Functions, it means that Microsoft knew. They knew that developers wanted less ceremony, but somehow that insight stayed trapped in Azure Functions instead of becoming a platform feature. Then came what I call the golden age of the community solutions. In 2013, we got ScriptCS, not CS Script, ScriptCS. Full REPL support, NuGet integration, for example, and it showed that C# scripting could really be something cool, something useful. But here's where it gets interesting. ScriptCS was aborted in 2013. Why? Maintenance costs. The community had built something amazing, but sustaining it was almost impossible. And that's when .NET Script stepped up. Released in 2016, cross-platform, VS Code integration became the de facto standard. Scott Hasselman did demos of it, I think, and it was everywhere. But even .NET Script had the fundamental problem. It was still a different tool, something outside of the platform. You have to discover it, install it globally, learn its conventions. Then you have examples like the Cake Build, the Cake Build tool. Here's a project that proves that C# scripting works at enterprise scale. There's some scenarios where it's extremely important, like having a complex CI/CD pipeline written with C#. But again, its own ecosystem, its own learning curve. It was not the platform. And here's what all the community solutions proved. The need was real. The demand was massive, and every single workaround we built was evidence that something was missing from the core platform. We can look into what the community was already doing with this type of tools to understand the use cases for this new feature. For example, the DevOps space, DevOps automation, is an amazing use case for this type of scripting way of writing code. For example, running the .NET Run deploy is something that is promising. And many have been doing it with the .NET script, for example, or with something like Cake Build, for example. Octopus Deploy had as part of that automation Script.ts. So when Script.ts was discontinued, they had to migrate it to .NET Script. And that is what happens when you depend on this type of community solutions. Okay, if it's part of the platform, we gain different level of confidence. So that means that enterprises will invest more on having tooling, taking advantage of this. And we know that in an enterprise system, it's quite common to need things like data migration scripts with entity framework, configuration management with strong typing, infrastructure tools that integrate with the existing .NET code bases. And they were building all of this with community tools, or even avoiding to do it, or having to bring all of that ceremony of the CS proj and all of that. But also, there's what I call the Python problem. Python became extremely popular for its simplicity. You quickly create one file, define some dependencies at the top, write your code, run that file. Perfect for those type of small things, small scripts that you can create for this type of maintenance job. In C#, before this feature, you had to create a directory, run .NET New Console, edit the program CS, add the NuGet packages, write the code, and finally run it. With this new approach, we are kind of like Python. So for those types of things, instead of relying in a language that likely you are not that proficient, if you are a C# developer, now you can without all of that ceremony that you need to go through just because of a single file with a few lines of code. And what's great about that is that you take the simplicity from Python, but you combine it with all the benefits of C#, type safety, IntelliSense, and the .NET ecosystem that you know. So what about web APIs, for example? Azure Functions, CSX already showed us that what developers want. But if you think about it, all of those things that have been building in the .NET in the recent versions, like removing the program main method, for example, having minimal APIs, all of those things, they were stepping stones to this moment. So now, with a single file, you can have a minimal API, but with the full power of ASP.NET Core, what is awesome. Now here's where the too late part becomes really interesting, because this feature, coming now after 20 years of community innovation, creates something more powerful than if Microsoft had built it from the day one. Because if Microsoft had built it from the day one, maybe they wouldn't appear. Okay, we would try to adapt, try to use the what exists in the platform to what we needed. This means that those tools that now we have, like .NET Script or, for example, Cake Build, they can still evolve and try to adapt to this new strategy. They can improve. For example, Cake Build can take this new approach to the deployment and DevOps pipelines, okay, with more domain-specific optimizations that the platform, that .NET will never have. But here's the key. Now we have something that will unify all of those things, something that we are all familiar with. Before, you have to learn different tools for different scenarios, different tooling, the setup was different, syntaxes were different, and that is a problem, as we know. This way, I believe that we can have a single entry point, a single .NET SDK experience. Same compiler, same runtime, same debugging tools, all the same. And when we look at this, we might think about being a competitor to Python or JavaScript for the first time. And maybe that is part of the reason for Microsoft trying to do this. I'm not sure if we are getting to that game on time. Maybe we are too late for that. However, if you are a developer coming from a different ecosystem and you come to .NET because in your day-to-day you move jobs and there you need to work with C#, for example, you will have some expectations. And that first experience, that onboarding experience, your first contact with the language, will tell you a lot about will you love it, will you not. Okay, those first impressions are extremely important. So if you are expecting that you come here, you create a file, you write some code, but no, we are in .NET. You need a CS approach. That can be a problem. So in other words, I don't believe that we are winning to Python or to JavaScript just because we have this. But it's one more way to convince those that come to .NET that .NET is great. We have all of those things that we love from the ecosystem, from the language, from everything. But sometimes those small things in the developer experience mean a lot. And I'm extremely excited about what can happen, the network effect. So if we start having a ton of C# scripts, they can be shared on GitHub repos, they can be gist files, they can be on documentations, they can be on a tutorial. For example, you just grab that script, you paste it, you run it, and that is amazing. That improves the developer experience, as I said. So let's use as an example a computer science course. You come from a computer science course, first lectures, you use something like JavaScript and Node.js, you create one file, you have your first application after a few minutes. Now you go to C# and you need to do all of that stuff for the sake of writing a console write line, okay? That doesn't make sense. So it sometimes is those small things that matter. And while many might think that this type of changes that we have been seeing recently, like moving those barriers out, they don't matter, but I think that this is basically Microsoft saying that, yes, developer experience matters more than purity or ideal scenarios or the day-to-day. The onboarding experience matters a lot for the future of a platform like .NET. So that leads to the question, what should you do? Maybe it's a good moment to start converting those small PowerShell or Bash scripts into something like using C#. Next time that you need to run a bit of code for performing a migration, maybe it's a good idea to try this approach. It's not that hard to get into it. But now I would love to hear from you. What do you think about this feature? Are you as excited as I am? Do you feel that this is a step in the right direction? Do you have use cases for it? I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment. In the meanwhile, you might want to watch this video right here, and I will see you in the next one.